Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Utah Film Pod. My name is Josh Terry. I'm your host, along with Dani Hatch and our friend Mark LaRocco. The three of us back to talk about all kinds of exciting things and a couple of new releases and kind of a subject that I think everybody has some interest in as we get into it. But first of all, how are you guys doing?
Doing great.
Pretty good. Not too bad.
Good. We're past the Ides of March, which I guess, even though I think I only read Julius Caesar the one time for school, but ever since then I've always thought of, the Ides of March. That's a significant thing, because we're heading into spring now, and it was in my case and in Danny's case, we just got done with spring break for Weber State, so that was kind of exciting.
Oh, it was great.
Was
Much needed.
Was that a whole week?
It was a whole week.
Yeah.
And I squoze everything I could out of that week. Even though I did it in rather cold weather, I took a road trip down into northern Arizona and got hit with a pretty significant snowstorm in Monument Valley, which was fun.
Yeah. But, it's amazing how different northern Arizona is from southern Arizona. So you can get some pretty rough weather in northern Arizona.
Yeah, well, and especially because, and I don't know, I've always kind of thought of this as unique to Weber State compared to other universities, but I mean, spring break is like the first full week of March, which just seems really early to me. And I know that, even with the regular semester schedule, I mean, you're basically done by the end of April, but it always seemed like, when I was teaching other places or when I was going to school, it always seemed like spring break was a little farther into the season, but hey, I'm not complaining.
Do you remember that year? Well, I was at Utah State in 2002, and they decided to hold spring break in February because of the Olympics in Salt Lake City. So everybody could go up to the Olympics and do internships or go there and do stories, because I was in the journalism program. And so we had spring break in February. We didn't get a March or April spring break, if I remember correctly.
So that was the year before I came to Utah State, because so 2002, 2003 was my first year at USU. So I would have missed, because I was still in Salt Lake for the Olympics.
So you were living in the heart of it all. You probably went to every event.
No, I tried to avoid as much of it as I could. I felt slightly bad because I thought, maybe this is something I should kind of get involved in, but I don't know. I just didn't feel like dealing with the craziness at the time. So. Well,
I'm sure you waited in a Disneyland level line for a beret, right? That was all the rage at the time, those berets.
Well, at the time and now, I mean, when has a beret not been just an item to covet?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Dani, you were telling me that you've been hearing some news. Speaking of school, there's some news circulating among the students. Why don't you tell us what you got?
No, exactly. So I'm guessing it's kind of that same thing where just looking ahead of when students aren't going to be in school, looking at internships and all that stuff. So I've just been getting so many emails from our awesome film department just giving us heads up on all the stuff going on. So that's kind of like more for students specifically, but there's also just a lot of festival stuff going on all throughout Utah. Like the Wasatch Mountain Film Festival is kicking off in about 2 weeks, and then the Red Rock Film Festival is open for submissions right now. So I don't know if we have any filmmakers who are listening, but those are some things to check out, especially if you live in the area and just want to support local films. So
that sounds fun. So do we know when is the Red Rock Film Festival going to take place?
And you know what? I totally need to update our page, because on the Utah.film website, there is like a little sidebar for festivals, but that was all last year's stuff, and it's already March, and I haven't updated those links.
I know. Time moves fast.
It really does. It is so bizarre. So I'll definitely be figuring that out again.
But
that was a little foreshadowing.
Right, no, I was going to say, but does time ever move backwards?
Yes. Well, we do have a couple of new movies to talk about as well, right? And I think, Dani, you had the first one that I think we want to talk about today, which is always exciting, a new offering from Pixar, right?
Yep, Turning Red, which it was huge anticipated new Pixar film, And this one was, in part, highly anticipated for just all the new cultural flavor it was bringing in. It follows this Canadian Chinese girl. Her name is Mei Ling, and she's 13 years old. She comes from her mom's very overbearing. Let's say that. There's a lot expected.
A tiger
of her.
mom.
Yeah, kind of. No, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's kind of fun getting to know her right at the start, because I don't know, I just really identified with her school work ethic even at 13. There's this line where she's like, all about that hustle, am I right? And I'm like, that was totally me doing my math homework too. So, but yeah, so just as the story progresses, she wakes up one morning and she has turned into a giant red panda, which turns out is kind of this family curse thing. And so now, as this 13-year-old who's already dealing with all her teenage drama, and she has to go see the boy band in concerts, and she's got to keep up with all her schoolwork and her friend life. But now she also has to deal with this red panda thing on top of it all. And I gotta say, I was really looking forward to this one. I thought the jokes looked really funny. I thought that this was gonna be, kind of this, I don't know, metaphor for puberty kind of thing. And if anything, it's more kind of used as like a joke kind of at the start, where there's this dramatic irony when she first changes. I don't think it carried well for the rest of it, and that's how I feel with everything in this movie, honestly. It has some good elements, especially at the start, but the execution was rough.
Mm-hmm.
And
oh,
no. I mean, this might be relevant for a Utah film pod specifically sort of thing, because it's also been very controversial, especially in this state where, there's a lot of conservative family values, and this movie does kind of push the limits a little bit on the progressive side. I wasn't surprised by it because it's Disney, and I know they're kind of, progressive leaning, so I didn't find it shocking and horrifying like a lot of parents did.
What I'm hearing is that one issue with local audiences might be that it comes into conflict with, some local values.
Yeah.
But then even beyond that, you feel like even regardless, it just wasn't executed very well. It was a good idea, but didn't have the follow through.
Yeah, well, so the whole premise is it's this coming of age story, this teenage girl, she's going to start to be a little more rebellious, she's going to push her boundaries a little bit, and, I'm fine with that, I think the issue lies in what's satisfying in those stories is that when, the kid and the parent are in conflict, I feel like both sides kind of realize they were wrong, and then they are able to reconcile, whereas this movie, it's kind of like Mei Lin was the only one who was right, and her mom just had to get on her page, and I think that's rubbing a lot of parents the wrong way.
Oh, okay.
And it's not satisfying. The whole time I was watching this, I was just like, I've seen all these things before, showing the Eastern culture and the Western culture kind of clashing. I've talked about The Farewell, which was amazing, and I feel like I feel like that showed it in a little more of a fair light, whereas this one is kind of like, oh, the ancient ways are just, who cares? And it's like, that's not fair, and that's not satisfying, and I just, that rubbed me the wrong way.
So it came across as too dismissive then.
It's super dismissive, and it's like, I feel like there are some very complicated things going on with family and with growing up, and it just felt lazy and underdeveloped, where it's like, May, she was really developed, but her mom, it was just, she was comically overbearing, where it's like, it doesn't even make sense, and you don't understand why she is that way ever. The thing that I kept thinking of during this movie was how The Little Prince did this whole story just way better. And sure, it didn't bring out the culture like Turning Red does, because it's just, your typical white suburban family, basically. But it was way richer, and it really developed the mom. And it kind of starts the same way as Turning Red. this mother and daughter being so in sync and doing things the same way, and the idea in Turning Red is like, oh, she's brainwashed by her mom, but in The Little Prince, it was more like that's what they do. And like I think of me and my mom, like we share a lot of the same quirks because I learned those from her, right? So it just and that's just not how it's treated in the movie, and it feels so weird. And so I'm thinking of all these other movies that handle these topics way better, and I'm like, is this just, my cultural influence that's making me think this way, that this isn't a good movie? But I started watching other reviewers who have more of, the left-leaning kind of political views, and a lot of them started comparing this movie to other movies that handled these topics better. So I think it's just
and that's not a good
writing.
sign, right?
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's almost universal. Like whenever I'm watching a movie and I start thinking about other movies that do the same things better, that's a bad sign.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you. I'm glad to hear you kind of, because I wondered what kind of review you would give it, and I also didn't really like the movie. I just didn't feel like it was for me. I have a few positive things about it that I appreciated quite a bit. I went to Toronto on my mission.
Oh.
So I was looking for a lot of the little references to Toronto and landmarks and the diversity in Toronto, which when I left on my mission in 97, it was named the most multicultural city in the world before I left in 96. And they hit that dead on.
Yeah.
I mean, her little friend group is a Korean, an Indian, and a white girl, and she's a Chinese girl, like Canadian Chinese girl. And there were just things I loved. There was a Punjabi Indian at the school that was shooing the tiger mom away when she was trying to interfere and get to her daughter. And so there was a lot of things in there. You see like the CN Tower, and there's the Sky Dome. And at one point they show the Sky Dome, and then in the foreground you see a blue jay, like, the Toronto Blue Jays. There's a blue jay bird there on a tree. And so I'm like, they really tried to hit all the Toronto stuff.
That's awesome. I wouldn't have even thought to look for that stuff, but it definitely looks like it's stylized after that. So that's so cool.
I mean, they did such a good job. I mean, that's at least worth half a star for me, the Toronto stuff. But I agree with you. I kind of wondered if the movie, who the movie is for, because I was thinking about this. You have Pixar, which is these wonderful animated movies, and there's really never a miss in like 30 years, whatever it is now, 27 years of Pixar. They're always good. I mean, even The Good Dinosaur, which is probably mediocre compared to a lot of Pixar movies, is in some ways like a kind of a gorgeous, thrilling Western movie about, dinosaurs and humans in kind of a reverse evolutionary role. But I think that this movie is one of the lower rated Pixar movies ever for me. And what I'm wondering about is, because I've been reading, I actually haven't really read reviews of it, but there's a local group in our neighborhood of Facebook moms that have started talking about it, and they've got some pretty insightful things to say. I was surprised, and many of them didn't like it.
Oh, yeah.
And it was cringy, even for their teenagers, because I'm thinking, well, is this supposed to be for like 13-year-olds, like people that are in that sort of puberty stage that are changing? But no, they're like embarrassed to watch it with their parents. And then the little kids, they like the panda. They like when people turn into pandas maybe, but they don't really get a lot of what's going on. They don't get a lot of the more mature references.
Yeah.
So I almost wonder if there's going to be there maybe should be a new category or genre of movie where Pixar just goes, like they have a PG-13 and they say, okay, we get that this is animated, this is a cartoon, but it's PG-13. I mean, pretty much all the superhero movies now are PG-13 anyway. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's what they should have done, is just gone for it and said, look, this movie's not for little kids. Because I don't think it is my question.
This is a question I have for both of you. Given everything you've described, is that why this movie is only streaming on Disney Plus and not being released in theaters?
Oh, is it not being released in theaters? I didn't know, because I know
I don't believe so.
I know they've been like doubling up. Because sometimes they'll be on the streaming version in theaters, but I didn't know.
I wonder if they did test audiences. You know how they do those movie focus groups where they do test audiences, and maybe it just didn't play well, and they said, we're not going to do a theatrical release. I have no idea. I'm just speculating, but maybe that's why.
I don't know. But I think that is a great point of like, who is this for? Because like, I do think it's too mature for kids. At least I think it'd be concerning for parents because, like I said, the messaging is really weird. Mm-hmm. Where there's never a moment where May realizes like, oh, I did something wrong. Like, she lies during the entire movie, and it's like, there's no consequence for it. And so, like, that's not a great thing to
Yeah.
teach younger kids. And then for teenagers, like, that was something, too, where it's like, I feel like all the funny jokes were in the trailer, which is why I was excited. I'm like, oh, this looks like it'll be fun and funny. And I didn't find it funny. I found it really annoying with the animation, like, just these big mouths in the middle of the screen, and and like the pacing of it is so fast, and I'm like, I didn't grow up with TikTok. I can't handle this.
I liked some of that.
You did?
There was some exaggerated animation that I kind of appreciated because it was for example, whenever they talk about or swoon over their favorite boy band called Four Town, their eyes will get really big
That's
anime
true, with the
eyes.
little stars in it.
Yeah, with the little stars,
Yeah.
and it's just funny. And so there's some almost like Mitchell's versus the Machine, like just crazy exaggerated animation moments in it that sometimes you just don't see in Pixar movies.
Yeah.
They're a little bit more conventional, but
Which I liked that one. I liked that animation.
some of that was funny.
Yeah.
But like Turning Red, it's just it's just so adult. I mean, it's not for little kids.
No.
And they have there's the joke when she wakes up, and I mean it's not really a spoiler because it's kind of near the beginning, and she's a panda, and she's like afraid to tell her parents what's happening, and she's going through this big change. Well, her mom, the tiger mom, assumes that she's gotten her period. And so she like starts saying, I'm going to get you things, I'm going to get you these pads, and she starts naming things. And so I kind of thought, okay, they're doing this joke. They're going to kind of do it once. And they did it like many times in the movie. Like
Up
the
until
mom
the mom figures out like what's
right.
going on.
The mom's practically chasing her down all over town and to school, like clutching like a fistful of all different types of pads. And I was like, this is PG?
Yeah.
I mean,
sorry, what I thought with that was like maybe it's trying to like prepare kids because like how sometimes sex ed is criticized like on the parents and everything. It's like you're not teaching your kids, you're too bashful about teaching it, but these kids need to know. And so like I could see that where it's like maybe this is an opportunity to talk about it. And that's why I say like I think the intention was for this to be kind of like a metaphor for puberty, but the problem that I had with that end is that like she's hiding it from her mom, and it's like, don't you want to teach kids like, hey, it's good to be open and honest with your parents, like talk to an adult. And so it like it wasn't educational, I don't think. Whereas like I could see that being a good thing for kids, where it's like, hey, maybe this can start up conversations in a way that doesn't feel as uncomfortable. Like, and I thought that's what it was, and I'm like, that's good, but it doesn't ever do that. It just does it for laughs, which makes it feel very mature. So
yeah, that was kind of weird.
Yeah.
And the turning into red part, like the turning into the panda part as a teenager, a 13-year-old, I mean, I kind of like the metaphor that it represents where, suddenly your body is changing and it's scary and you're hairier and you're bigger and you're like uncomfortable and you don't know what's going on with your body. And so there was a lot of things I think were pretty appropriate and how maybe representing like in this exaggerated visual style how it must feel for a teenager to start going through that. But then they didn't either. I think they should have kept it PG and not had some of the more obvious references to like menstruation, or just said, hey, this is a PG-13 Pixar movie. It's the world's first, and we're going to kind of address things that are uncomfortable for kids under 13. But that's the thing is, I think it's very uncomfortable for young teenagers. And I guess, I've never been a teenage girl, so I can't really speak to how it might feel. But
everything's
from what I've read,
though.
Yeah, I guess everything's the worst. Whenever a movie tries something new and different, and it's not a reboot or a sequel or retread or remake or any of those things, I always kind of try to give it points for that. That was creative. So yeah.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I do want to give points to a movie that I do feel was original, just not this one, because right after watching Turning Red, I was like, I'm so mad at this movie, I need to watch something else. So I just immediately went to Netflix and turned on The Adam Project, which also kind of has a lot of those coming-of-age kind of themes. Like, the boy in that one, I think he's 12, right? So
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, so kind of like in the same age range and everything. So, but I liked it significantly better than Turning Red. And I don't know if it's because it was a great movie or just because I was comparing it to this movie the entire time. But you saw that one, didn't you, Josh?
I did. I saw it. I saw that one. I did not see Turning Red. And so what I can say is that on its own, the Adam Project is pretty good.
Okay.
And maybe in comparison to Turning Red,
Maybe
it's even better.
Maybe it's Citizen Kane in comparison to Turning Red.
Well, it depends on how bad Turning Red really is. But no, I in fact, I don't know, maybe to kind of jump ahead to the review portion, the feeling I have about Adam Project is this is a perfect flagship Netflix release because I enjoyed it. It has, a recognizable kind of, A-list Hollywood cast. It's not quite good enough that I would say, oh yeah, I would go out of my way to spend money to see this in a theater, but I really enjoyed it as a Netflix option on the platform. And yeah, and then maybe compared to other coming of age type films, maybe it looks that much better. I don't know. I mean, so the plot of the Adam Project is basically that Ryan Reynolds, who we know and love from so many movies, has traveled back from the year 2050 into our present day, intending to save his wife, who has also gone back in time. They're both like in this kind of special Air Force project of the future or something. But he actually winds up in the wrong year. And as a result, he meets his younger self about age 12, kind of in this, coming of age type of moment. And so he basically has to team up with his preteen self to go on this adventure to reconcile with family matters and save his wife and basically stop this dystopian future from happening, because we don't see a whole lot of where Ryan Reynolds comes from. But from everything that they describe, it's basically like the nightmare 1985 with Biff in control of everything. And so they're going. So Ryan Reynolds has come back to try to see if he can correct some things, and I guess it involves Zoe Saldana plays his wife, and so there's kind of this romantic angle, there's this coming of age angle, and there's just kind of this fun idea of, what would it be like if you got to hang out, if you were 12 and got to hang out with yourself at age 40, or if you were 40 and got to go back and speak with yourself when you were 12. And that was, I enjoyed that quite a bit. I thought it was a lot of fun. And Dani, from what you're describing, it sounds like you kind of enjoyed that too.
Oh, absolutely. And I think Ryan Reynolds is just kind of this perfect pick for it, because with his sense of humor, he can be so likably unlikable, which was, I think, perfect for this movie. Because, I mean, you still love him. And, like, his kid self, like, this kid was amazing. I think he nailed it, especially the way he plays off of Ryan Reynolds. Like, they do seem like the same person, I think, in a very fun way, where their banter was, like, everything I was living for with this movie. And what I loved about that is that they're both they're funny, they're fun, but they're also unlikable at the beginning. That sets up this really fun arc, as like, because they're butting heads, they're kind of reflecting a little more on who they are, and they're kind of improving themselves a little bit, and it's so fun to watch. And the acting was probably just my favorite part of this. The two of them, Jennifer Gardner as the mom, Zoe Saldana was really great. Like, I feel like the acting was absolutely incredible in this movie, and this movie made me cry 3 times. Three times. It hurt.
It's a 3-timer, a 3-bagger.
It's a 3-timer, and no, it just flipping between the really funny moments, but also these heartfelt moments. It just, man, I think they did such a great job with it. Maybe I'm just a sucker for all these like father-child kind of relationship sort of things, because like I'm noticing it's always these kind of, I don't know. We don't need to go into like my psyche here for this, but like, what?
Well, if I can make a comment on the father son, so this made me think of something really funny that we actually just talked about in it was either our previous episode or our previous episode. Because I also noticed how, well, I think anybody who watches this movie is going to notice how Walker Scobell, I guess is the name of the actor, the kid who plays young young Ryan Reynolds, and the way that he imitated Ryan Reynolds' mannerisms while acting opposite Ryan Reynolds, would just, I mean, it's a bold thing, right? I mean, it takes guts, especially as a little kid, to do that. But it reminded me, so I went and rewatched Batman Returns after our Batman discussion. And I can't, oh gosh, I don't know if we mentioned this, but Christopher Walken plays like the business, well, he's, at the risk of getting in trouble, he's kind of like this Donald Trump clone, like in Gotham, of kind of like this big business magnate, but there's this other character who plays his son, and it's kind of like this big kind of thick knucklehead type guy, and he's basically doing a Christopher Walken impression in front of Christopher Walken, and it's hilarious because it's not, I mean, you wouldn't call it good acting in just on the surface, but the fact that that this guy is on set basically trying to do a hammy Christopher Walken impression because he's playing his son. It's hilarious.
Oh, that's amazing.
And Adam Project reminded me of that. So not to get too far off track.
Oh, no, absolutely.
That was kind of funny.
Oh, no, and that's why I think like that's probably the biggest reason to watch this movie is to see that in action. I feel like when young Adam is by himself, it's almost like the writers are trying to make him sound like Ryan Reynolds a little too much. But when he's with Ryan Reynolds, it's even better, which is insane. Yeah. Like it was just so crazy to see that. Downside being, I think because more of the budget was spent on these A-list actors, like the special effects weren't amazing, I don't think. So I think that might take away from it.
They were serviceable.
Yeah,
they did the job, but they weren't going to really. You're right. Yeah. I mean, it's I wouldn't call them an afterthought, but I thought, this movie looks good enough to be, and this is kind of what I was referring to before. It's like this definitely feels like a featured Netflix production release, but I don't know that it's something about it just didn't quite feel like this is a, wide theatrical quality release, and maybe that's part of what that was.
And I think I know why too, because I realized as I was watching this, it kind of had the same issue that I saw with The Tomorrow War, which I thought was also amazing. They're both these time travel movies, right? And they're both sci-fi, with these A-list actors, but they went to streaming. And when I'm watching them, I see, the visual effects aren't as, amazing, but also the pacing is really weird. Like the editing is odd. Where I feel like if something was released in theaters, you would have all these producers being all like, you have to trim this up. You have to make it, really finely tuned for an audience to see it in the movie theater, right?
Okay.
Whereas on streaming, they can kind of just more release it as is. And there are some moments in both movies where it's just like, you have all this high action and everything, and then it just suddenly stops. In Tomorrow War, it was even worse because that movie was like twice as long as this one. And it feels like you have a full movie, and then I paused it, and it's like, oh my goodness, I have an hour left. It's like, we already hit the climax, like, what's going to happen? And then it's almost as if we're starting again, like, exposition and rising action, and then getting to the climax. And it's just kind of weird to see editing like that. But I guess with streaming services, you have a little more freedom to show everything, but I feel like that isn't a great thing. Like you kind of need to be a little picky.
Well, because that's kind of the question that it leads me to is that are they doing that because they feel like they have the luxury of doing so in streaming, or is it just symptomatic of it not being a very good movie, or just not good writing? Like because I could totally see. I mean, because we've seen lots of and this probably is a little easier to see with like TV series like Arrested Development. When a show is put together for broadcast, it has to be, if it's a half-hour show, it's 22 minutes. If it's an hour-long show, it's going to be like 43 because of commercials. But then the second something starts going exclusively to streaming, all the Arrested Development episodes are 32 minutes, or this one's 27, or this one's 36, and so they're consciously making use of the extra flexibility.
Yeah.
But just like you say, Dani, that doesn't necessarily mean it's good.
Yeah.
And judging by the new Arrested Development, I don't think it is.
Yeah.
As I guess now that we're kind of in a place where every movie that deals with time travel has to be kind of meta about it, like, and always referencing other stories and movies, like with Avengers Endgame, right? And they're talking about how they're going to go back in time. But they're saying, oh, wait a minute, you mean like Back to the Future is full of crap, and so it's like all of these time travel movies now have to kind of reference each other, and they have to kind of explain why our version of time travel is actually the right one. and I don't know. I did feel a little bit, if not lost by the time travel in Adam Project, it didn't seem as clear cut and easy to follow as in some other movies. And so almost for that reason alone, I didn't feel like I wanted to. Like, I'll just put it this way. I wouldn't rank it at the top of my time travel list by a long shot, but I still enjoyed it, you know. This is a good movie. This is, like, I would say this is a solid 3-star movie, right? This is not don't go spend a lot of money to see it. If you've already got your Netflix subscription, you're good to go. Definitely, you know, take some time to see it.
I would pay for it.
You would pay for it? Okay.
Yeah, I would. It was like a 3.5 for me. I thought it was really good.
3.5? Are you crazy?
No.
You're going a half star more? Oh my gosh.
Well, I'm intrigued. I haven't seen it, so I plan to see it.
Totally see it. It's interesting.
Yeah, it sounds like it's better than Turning Red, and I like time travel movies.
And you already wasted 2 hours of your life on that one, so you might as well take a step up.
No, this one is going to be just solid. I think the one downside that I think people might have with it, like based on personal preferences, is that it can be kind of crude. Like there's a good amount of, you know, if you've seen a Ryan Reynolds movie, you kind of know what to expect. So just kind of keep that in mind. But this one's up there for me, and I think because I don't care as much as about the time travel aspect. I think I was wanting a movie like this anyways, because I'd recently watched a movie where I thought that it was someone's future self confronting like their past self, which I really liked because it's like, oh, look at this contrast. See how much he's grown, how much he's changed in these last couple of years. But it turns out he was cloned, and I was kind of bummed out. So I've been wanting a movie where it's like I wanted to see that comparison really, really bad, and I think this movie totally delivered. Because I was here for the characters and the emotions, and so. And I think for me with a time travel movie, that's the important thing is like, you know, that's a main focus is like, who are we going back in time to see? And typically it's family, right? And so you're establishing these bonds with them. So, and I think it hit that really well. So for what I'm looking for in a time travel movie, I think this one stacks up pretty high.
So you're talking about the themes, the characters, the kind of the emotional connection. Yeah. No, and I think that it did much better with that than, well, and see, I'm not even really, I mean, I don't want to sound like I disliked the movie, right? I just didn't like it as much. But I do feel like if I had to rate the characteristics that succeeded, I would definitely say that it succeeded more in terms of character and theme than it did in execution.
Science and,
Yeah. Well, so this gives us a perfect opportunity to talk about time travel movies.
Let's do it.
Which one? You guys got any favorites? I was making a list because I had a few obvious ones that just sprung to mind.
Oh yeah.
But then I got on and started looking up, and there are a lot of time travel movies out there.
Yeah.
Or even have that time element, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, and that's the question too, right? Is it, you know, what classifies, you know, a quote unquote time travel movie versus just one that, I mean, for perfect example, one of the ones I thought of was Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, right? Because not really a time travel movie, but there is a pretty significant use of time travel at a certain point in the movie that, you know, for the sake of anybody who hasn't watched it 20 years later.
Yeah.
So I don't get yelled at.
I mean, and that's true because some time travel movies, it's you're talking about decades, and that's just, I don't remember how far she goes back, a few hours or something. Is that when Hermione goes
it's just
back?
earlier in the day.
Yeah, earlier in the day. So, yeah, I guess technically it's a time travel movie because she travels through a short period of time.
But I wouldn't think it. I wouldn't rate it on my all-time time travel list for that reason.
Right.
You know, because it's just not.
It's not the
central
point of the movie. Yeah.
It's the gimmick that helps Harry Potter save the day once again.
That's right. Well, there's one that I really like. Maybe you've heard of it, called Back to the Future.
That one's my top one.
I've been hearing stuff about that. Yeah. No.
Check it out.
Okay. Well, since it's obvious, since it's clear now that we're in agreement, can any time travel movie ever be better than Back to the Future? Maybe that's the better question.
No.
I don't know.
I don't see it. I don't see
think
it.
So.
It's hard. It's hard to think that something could outdo it because it's just almost such a perfect movie.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of, aside from just the clarity of the time travel concept, because at least in the first movie, it definitely gets a little tougher to follow later on in the sequels, but that first movie, it's very straightforward, and I don't feel like people are kind of second guessing or trying to catch up, but even beyond that, like there are a lot of movies that I know I appreciate more because of my nostalgia for that time than for the movie itself. But you go back and rewatch Back to the Future, and it's an incredible movie, just flat out.
Yeah.
The writing, how all the subplots and everything just tie up in that perfect finale, and the fact that they're juggling kind of this crazy time travel concept in the middle of it. Yeah, no, I mean it's easily my favorite time travel movie, and probably on my short list of favorite overall movies as well.
Oh yeah, I remember one time my dad telling me that it was. I think he said it was the funniest movie he ever saw. I mean, and it's funny because it's not. I guess people don't think of comedy first when they think of Back to the Future. I mean, it's an action movie and it's fun and kind of campy, but it actually has a lot of comedy in it. Michael J. Fox is great, and
it is.
He had to be in that movie. I mean, I don't know if you know, but I think it was Anthony Michael Hall that was first cast in that movie.
It was Eric Stoltz.
Oh, it was Eric Stoltz.
Yeah,
he was in the movie. And they shot a bunch of scenes, and it just wasn't working, and they fired him.
Yeah,
and then so
because Michael J. Fox was who they originally wanted, but he was
doing Family Ties.
Pun intended. He was tied up doing Family Ties, and then but then he became available, and because I've seen a couple little documentaries about it, and they talk about how it was really awkward because they had to fire several
Eric
weeks in, and
they had to,
poor guy.
Yeah, I mean. There's a documentary, I think it's called Back in Time. Is that the one on Netflix?
I know there's one on Hulu.
Is it Hulu? I saw one years ago, maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago, that I thought it was on Netflix, and it's about, it even has some of the actors in it, especially some of the ones that didn't end up becoming famous, like the first girlfriend of Michael J. Fox,
that's right.
who wasn't in the other movies.
And Jennifer 1.0.
Yeah, yes, and the guy who played the mayor. The one that said, I'm going to clean up this town, and then he becomes the mayor 30 years later. Yeah, it was, anyway, it's just, there's so many great things about that movie. The trilogy is good too. I mean, I was a big fan. When I was younger, I remember being so fascinated with not just time travel, but with the future. Anytime there was a conception or a visualization of the future in anything, it always was interesting to me. And so I even read the novelization of Back to the Future 2, which you don't really learn a lot because it's just a novelization.
It's a novelization.
Of the movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, loved them both.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Okay, well, so if Back to the Future is the undisputed number one, then what are some other time travel options that are worth consideration?
I mean, I have a little oddball choice of a movie I just introduced my kids to a couple years ago that I liked when I was little, called Flight of the Navigator.
Okay.
You guys seen that?
Was so fun.
I loved it.
I loved that one.
Yeah, it's a movie about a kid who is, basically, he goes missing kind of for a while. He's like kind of like taken up, and when he comes back, he's everyone's older. He hasn't aged at all, and he's gone missing. His family has thought he was dead. His younger brother is now, I don't know, 10 or 15 years older than he is. And so then the rest of the movie is how to kind of, if there's a way to correct that. But one thing I liked about it is he goes in this, he's inside this really cool ship that, the U.S. government can't even figure out how to open. And there's all these little creatures in there, little aliens that have been collected from like different planets. And it's an adventure movie for kids. It's got some comedy in it, and just, one of those movies that when you see it as a kid, as a young boy, you just imagine like yourself in his shoes. And I believe it's on Disney Plus. I think that's where we watched it. I'll have to check.
I seem to remember it being a Disney movie. I can't remember if I actually saw it or not. I definitely remember it coming out. I think I can picture the kid in my head.
Yeah.
He's like sitting in a big Captain Kirk chair, right?
Yeah.
It's all lit up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, I remember that.
Yeah.
And Danny, you've seen it too?
I would always get this one confused with Star Kid. I don't know why, but like the idea
Okay.
of a kid being trapped in some kind of like alien technology, like totally different movies, but for some reason in my mind, like those, I can never get the plot of this one straight because
Okay.
like it always morphs with that one. But yeah, no, I remember that one being really fun.
So here's a question. Do you consider Groundhog Day a time travel movie?
No.
Okay.
No, I wondered about that, but it almost seems now like there are so many movies about a character who keeps looping through the same point in time.
In order to
'Cause,
learn a valuable lesson.
Well, if you haven't seen these, I think these are very underrated and just adorable little movies. Happy Death Day and
I was
Happy
about to
Death
bring
Day
that
to
up.
You
Yes.
were so fun and so good and just really kind of, under the radar, didn't really make a big splash, but yeah, that's another one. The Oh my gosh, it was just a few years ago. It was Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt.
Edge of Tomorrow.
Oh,
Edge
yes.
of Tomorrow. That's
Yep.
another one. Yeah, so I don't know. I almost see that as kind of a separate genre where
I
they're
think
not
so.
really traveling in time. They're just kind of skipping on a record.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're stuck in a recurring loop, in a repeating loop until
Yeah.
something happens. Yeah. I've heard Palm Springs is that way. I haven't seen that, but I've heard that the Hulu movie Palm Springs is kind of like Groundhog Day.
Okay. Well, all I know is that none of them are anywhere close to as good as Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure,
Yeah.
which was one of my other time travel nominees. That
Oh,
one
you
is
have
just
to. You have to.
Have you noticed how much we end up talking about movies from the 80s and early 90s?
yeah.
It happens a lot. Almost every podcast
It does.
I've been on, and it's probably my fault. There's always at least one mention of
Those are
movie
my
like
picks.
that.
Like I was gonna go with Back to the Future. Like I don't know. Those
Yeah.
are movies that I grew up with. So it's just like I don't know. They're
Well, I mean
staples.
those ones in particular, right? They have become like kind of like the standard
Yeah.
of quality,
Yeah.
Now one that I want to say came out in the 2000s. This is the one that I hear this one referred to as the most scientifically accurate time travel movie, which seems like kind of a dubious distinction, but there's a movie from about 10, 15 years ago called Primer. Does that
yes.
one sound?
Yeah, I
So
knew.
Mark,
I was thinking of that too.
have you seen it
Yeah.
or have you just heard of it?
I've seen
Because
it.
I watched it once, technically. I can say that I watched it. I cannot say that I followed or understood it.
Yeah, I didn't really understand it either, which kind of surprised me for a small, low-budget indie movie that it could be so cerebral and kind of complicated.
Yeah. Well, I know that like when you, 'cause, I mean, the premise is like two engineers basically invent, by accident, right?
Accidentally invent a time machine.
They invite a time machine, but the complexity of the plot is so, involved that, when I've read about this movie online, people will come up with like charts, like where they're trying to kind of map out what's happening where and why you're seeing what, and it's just so complex and so. To me, it strikes me as more of a novelty than so. Okay, that it might be the most technically scientific, accurate, whatever you want to say, but it's not like a rewatch it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
every month,
No, that makes sense.
when you're bored type of like it's. It kind of reminds me of what you were saying about Tenet, the other episode where, you want to be challenged, but you don't want to be miserable.
Yeah, you don't want to be baffled. And
Yeah,
some people
and-
do. Some people torture themselves and they watch something over and over in order to try to understand it.
Yeah.
So maybe with Primer or Tenet, people have done that.
No, and that's to each his own, I guess. It's like I said, it was worth watching once just so that I could kind of bring it up in a conversation like this. But, that was a doozy.
Can I throw
Now,
a few more names at you?
Oh yeah, let's hear a few.
Okay. Austin Powers, International Man of
Oh,
Mystery.
that's well. Now, okay. How would we? Well, because it's kind of different, right? Because
Just cryogenically frozen.
well, but the character. Do we spend any time in the '60s, or is it just exclusively him being brought here?
No, I think we do a few minutes, 10 or 15
Yeah.
minutes.
Just like the opening musical number.
Yeah, probably. They kind of do that in every one of those movies.
Right, right.
Yeah, one of them it's like Umbrellas of Cherbourg style. I think it might be the third one. Anyway, yeah.
Well,
Okay,
something
right.
I was
Austin
thinking
Powers.
of with that, because my sort of backup, and something I was thinking about with the time travel thing is just like being misplaced in time, almost. Because like I said, with Adam Project, like I care about the characters and the acting and stuff, and I love it when there are people who belong in a time and there are people who do not belong in the time. Like that's an element
Yeah.
I just love, right? And this is more of a fantasy than a sci-fi. But I was thinking, especially watching Adam Project, of 13 Going on 30,
Okay.
where she's, it's not like a science story. It's like, magic pixie dust that magically transports her to her 30s. But I find it really fun where, she's in this 30-year-old body, but she's just like super sweet and cute and fun. And
Kind of like Big.
I was
yeah,
thinking of
exactly.
Big.
Yeah. Okay, how about Frequency? Have you guys seen Frequency?
Yes,
I don't know
I was
about that
thinking
one.
about that one too.
Ooh. Danny, if you have not seen Frequency, I would really love to know what you think of Frequency because I suspect that you will like Frequency.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a really sweet movie. It's about
It's a father and son kind of movie.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's a
yeah, no,
father-son
I
type
saw the
thing.
father and son in the description. I'm like, you got me hooked.
yeah.
Oh, goodness.
No,
Okay.
Jim Caviezel? Is
Yeah,
that his
Jim
name?
Caviezel and Quaid.
And Dennis
Dennis
Quaid.
Quaid.
Yeah. And Dennis Quaid is the father, playing the father in the late 1960s. And Jim Caviezel is in the late 1990s, which was when the movie came out. And they are connected through this mysterious radio wave phenomenon. I think it has to do with like the Northern Lights or something like that. And so they wind up solving a murder mystery together, but then like influencing
Past and
their
future
worlds
events.
back and forth. Yeah,
And
right,
preventing tragedies that would have occurred by the 90s that were going to happen after the 60s. I think
Yeah.
there was even a
No, it's,
serial
So
killer.
basically everything in
Yeah.
the 60s?
No, it's cool. That was a fun one. I remember that
That's
one.
interesting.
That was a good one. That was a
Yeah.
good one.
Yeah.
Midnight in Paris was another one I had on my list.
Yeah, me too. That's fun.
Kind of probably one of the best Woody Allen movies I've seen in kind of his 21st century selections.
Same with
When
yep.
Owen Wilson basically gets transported back to the 1920s was kind of the
That was the
Fitzgerald
first
era.
one. Yeah, it was the era.
Oh, okay, that's right, because he
like-
goes to a few different eras. Yeah,
Right, because one of the funny kind of repeating bits of the movie is that people are always pining for the past. Like
Yeah.
nostalgia. Kind of reminds me of the Stephen Wright joke. Nostalgia isn't what it used to be. And yeah, I love that because he goes to the 1920s and he sees people like Gertrude Stein and F. Scott
Yeah.
Fitzgerald and
And Zelda.
Zelda and all these
Yeah.
famous people, and he's just so amazed to see them. And then a couple of them are complaining about not living like what was it like in the 1890s, like the
Right.
true golden age or whatever. And yeah, it's funny.
The grass is always
The grass
greener.
was always greener back then. But
I
I
actually
in
had a
time.
conversation like that with my husband just last night, actually, because we were just like talking about writers in the 1800s, and he loves writing. I'm like, man, you were just born in the wrong century there. And
Yeah.
he's like, well, they're probably reminiscing on, previous generations being better.
Right.
And then it's like, when you finally hit the caveman, they're like, man, I'm awesome. I've got everything.
We peaked too early, and it's been downhill ever since.
Danny, have you seen Midnight in Paris?
No.
Oh,
no, I
that's
have
another
not.
one I think
Yeah,
you'd love.
that's a good one.
I mean,
That's a good one.
It's also for people who are kind of like artists at heart, I think, because all this movie is about
yes,
this
'cause
guy
I'm an
who's a
artist.
writer. Yes, you're an artist, and that's who he's interested in. He's not going back to see engineers or politicians or whatever. It's basically all the great artists of the early 1900s and late 1800s, and of course Woody Allen
fun.
is a fan of that, and it's just fun.
Ooh.
It's a sweet, kind of charming, funny movie. It
And I'm
is
seeing
probably
Rachel
the best.
McAdams is in this, and
Yeah.
I feel like,
Yeah.
She's the
like
lead.
you have to have Rachel McAdams in a time travel movie.
Oh, Time
Like all of
Traveler's
them.
Wife. Yes.
Yeah,
Well, and now
And
'cause
About
I also
Time.
about
Yeah.
time, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now here's a curveball. Did any of you guys think of Star Trek 4: The Voyage Home?
I think I would have had to see it to think of it.
And you haven't?
I don't think I remember it well enough.
I wasn't
Oh,
allowed to
man.
watch Star Trek. The skimpy,
Well-
tight outfits,
Oh.
not allowed in my house.
Oh,
Wow.
there
When I
aren't
was
any
growing
skimpy
up.
tight outfits in the 1980s Star Trek movies.
Is this the one with the whales? Is this the
Yes.
one? Okay.
Yeah. So granted, I think you have to be a bit of a Star Trek fan to enjoy this one because it's
Fair.
it's kind of within that genre or that universe. But the premise of this one is that this mysterious probe comes and is threatening to destroy the Earth, and so Captain Kirk and company, without taking too much time to connect all the dots, basically they have to go back in time and find humpback whales in order to save the future. And because it's kind of this ecological message, like,
Oh,
because it's kind of the mid 1980s, and
yeah.
we're destroying the planet, we need to save the whales and all this. And so this is like this 2-hour sci-fi
Just
lecture
about saving
about
the
why we shouldn't be hunting whales on the open seas. But
Oh my
no, it's a
gosh.
lot of fun. It's a lot
That
of fun.
is
If
fun.
you, especially if you like, especially the Star Trek original cast and stuff. This is definitely one of the better movies. But now, how about Terminator series? What do you guys think of Terminator?
Those are great
'Cause
ones.
that's,
Those are more of the dystopian, dark side of time travel. I mean, it's, I guess, necessary to
Yeah.
save the world, but it's like, yeah, the future has gone to, or is going to go to hell in a handbasket. You need the Terminator to... I think Terminator 2 was great. I mean, it's
Yeah.
superior to the first one, and had a much bigger budget. And that was kind of the
Yeah.
hit of '92. I mean, that was like, that
Oh,
was a
yeah.
huge movie.
Right.
Um,
right.
Schwarzenegger at the top of his game, Guns N' Roses music, and a lot of cool effects. The T-1000 special effects, I'll always remember seeing that for the first
Oh, yeah.
time.
No, that was a big deal. I remember that very, very clearly. Now, diminishing returns since then. I've enjoyed a few of the movies since then, but I definitely think that the peak
Yeah.
was Judgment Day. But no, I mean, it's kind of hard to. I mean, in terms of a franchise that's based around the concept of time travel, I think Terminator's on that short list.
Well, and I think that's an interesting thing too, because every time you revisit it, you're kind of ruining the previously established like time travel-ness going on, right? Like you're kind
That's
of
the
messing
risk,
that.
right?
Yeah. So I mean,
Yeah.
that's something you have to be careful about when you're doing time traveling series, which I think is why most of the time it's kind of a one shot, except for Back to the Future where it does tie so well together. But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just you don't want to
only
mess up
thing-
what you had.
The only thing I wonder about is, I mean, we can do spoilers, all right? I mean, Back to the Future is like 30, 40 years old.
Yeah, if our audience hasn't watched the 3 Back to the Future movies by
Right.
this point,
And I'm only going to spoil the first one.
You know what? They can put us on pause
Right.
and come back later.
So Michael J. Fox, so Marty, he goes back in time. I remember reading an Entertainment Weekly review of this 20-something years ago, and they called it a freaky Oedipal trip. So it kind of is. It's a freaky Oedipal trip, Oedipus, complex. And so he goes back in time,
Yeah.
and he saves his family and saves his future by doing so. And he has face-to-face contact with his mom and his dad in 1955 a lot. Like he kind of becomes friends, influences their lives. His mom has a crush on him. So I guess sort of the opposite of an Oedipal complex. But anyway, so he goes back to the future at the end of the movie, and he's like he's grown up, and you kind of wonder, like, did they not recognize their son as the kid who saved their, who started them on their romantic path to getting together and starting a family? Like, you wonder. I mean, it was a long time ago, but was there ever a moment?
I've heard that.
Was there a moment where they're like, wait a minute?
Well, if it's like
Look.
pre-Facebook, do you really remember people that you knew for like a week? I don't think he was there for very long. He was there for like a week.
Yeah, it wasn't very long.
And it was like 20
No,
years
and that's-
ago.
Was there ever a
Right.
picture, though?
That's the argument I've
Did
heard.
somebody
That's-
take a
that's-
picture, and they look at it and they say,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, that looks just like Marty. Calvin, or whatever his name was. Calvin looks like Marty. I don't know.
You're just trying to undermine Back to the Future, and you can't.
I can't. I can't. And I don't mean
It's
to.
I won't
perfect.
let
It's
you.
still think
imperfect.
it's a perfect movie. So
with just a great car even. I mean, and I think that's one of the things that actually I think that even when we were kids at the time, but then audiences now as well kind of missed the joke on was that because we kind of look at it as, oh, the DeLorean, it's so cool looking because it's this sports car and they made it into a time machine. But it was actually, as I understand it,
Yeah.
it was, well, because the joke was that that the DeLorean was not a good car. Like,
It's like you
it
made a
had
time machine
no power.
out of a DeLorean?
No, exactly.
Like that's the
Like,
line. Yeah.
You
Oh,
know,
yeah.
we kind of read that now as, wow, you made a time machine out of this crazy sports car, but it's like, no, you
it's
made
a
a time
crap
machine
car.
out of this piece of junk.
Yeah.
That was like the joke. And, you know, it's
But
just
it looks
'cause
so good.
That's
It's just-
funny,
Oh, it
too,
does.
It's
'cause
so sick.
that's funny because you think about the gull-wing doors are really cool looking. Like, I remember seeing
Yeah.
that thing. That's the coolest thing I've ever seen. But it's also impractical, you know, in
Yeah.
so many ways.
True.
I mean, even the
True.
Tesla doors, like, nowadays they open up straight up and then go up. They don't
yeah,
swing wide and
Wow,
hit anything
yeah.
next to them, you know. And so, yeah, it's funny to see that DeLorean because it is a cool looking car. And but yeah, they didn't make it for very long.
Well, you know what time machine vehicle works in any situation?
Toll booth.
It's
Oh,
A phone
Police
booth.
box.
I mean, a phone booth. Oh yeah, the police box. I think there's a joke
Yeah.
on the Lego Movie about that where they show 4 or 5 different famous movie time machines.
Well, yeah,
yep.
because so Bill and Ted
Yeah.
and Doctor Who
Yep.
and who else?
They have the
Well, the
DeLorean.
DeLorean.
They have.
Oh, well, okay. I thought you meant that there were lots of phone booths.
No, I think
No.
it's.
Because were those the only
Did
two?
they show the phone booth? I can't remember. I don't. Maybe they didn't. You know, Keanu
Yeah.
Reeves he's real because he's in a phone booth. I mean, that plays a key role in The Matrix in how you get out of the
That's
world.
Oh, yeah,
True.
that's right.
Interesting.
That's
'cause
right.
He's, yeah.
And Superman uses phone booths too.
Wow. But you know, they're not around anymore, are they?
They're not. So kind of the weirdest experience to watch movies from like 20 years ago plus that are built around plot points that don't even matter.
Right,
Like,
yeah.
It's like it's a movie where if somebody just had a smartphone, they could have made a call at the beginning of the movie and story's over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like just, you know, just because of the entire plot hinged on some kind of technology or something that technology has now addressed and taken care of. And Danny, do you have any final time travel recommendations?
No, I think I hit all of mine. I've kind of been
Cool.
touching on. Yeah. But I have a lot more on my watch list now. I feel like
Yes.
that's a nice thing coming here. You guys have seen so many things.
Our work
It's nice
is
that you
done.
guys have filtered through
We've done the
everything for
work.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I just get to reap the benefits.
Yeah, I've heard one of my movie friends on Facebook one of his favorite movies is About Time, and I've never seen that. So I that's on my list.
So good.
I've
need to
seen
see
it
it.
once, and I would like to go see it again.
Yeah.
So I think that one's because Bill Nye isn't he the dad?
Yeah, he's the dad.
Anything with that guy he's
Bill Nye the Science Guy?
Oh my
no.
gosh.
How do you pronounce it? Is it Nye?
Oh, is it Nighy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's in
he is.
Love Actually and
Well,
yeah.
he's in Shaun of the Dead, and
Shaun
he
of the
was
Dead.
he was in another Harry Potter movie I was just watching tonight. He briefly played the Minister of Magic, who at the beginning of
that in
Deathly
5?
Hallows Part
Oh,
I
1.
swear
7.
everyone's been in Harry Potter. Like
oh yeah.
Yeah,
It's
there's
like a
there's a
who's
great
who
cast to
of
that.
British theater and
Oh,
movies.
yeah.
True.
No, it
Yeah.
is. It truly is. Which is a discussion for another time.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah,
let's wrap
we could
things
do a
up.
whole Harry Potter episode one day.
Oh,
There we
totally
go. There
could.
we go. After we do our soundtrack episode, and after we do our Coen Brothers episode, and
Oh.
Right.
we'll just keep them coming. But in the meantime, be sure to check out utah.film for our new articles and new announcements about film festivals and other upcoming events. And leave us some comments and give us some thoughts. And thanks for spending time with us. And we'll catch you next time.